And I'm very pleased to be here. In fact, it's a continuation of a conversation we had last year already, Indo-German workshop on water resources management, the official title, where I had the pleasure to be invited by Nadu as well. So my thanks go to the Heidelberg Center, and I even have been about 2 years ago at TERI University. Maybe quite a few or all of you at TERI remember Dr. Joachim Schmerbeck, who is a colleague of mine. We both came here in the same program as long-term visiting faculty to different universities. And I've been here for 3 years now with the Indo-German Center for Sustainability, which is working in 4 core areas: energy, waste management, water management, and land use, or urbanization, which is the core area I'm working in. So I'm actually not a water expert, but my background is urban planning, regional planning, and also social anthropology. And we have ventured into a research project on peri-urban Chennai, which is located about 40 kilometers outside the city, where we increasingly started working on the interface of land, water, and governance. And some of this work I would like to present here today. So when we are talking about the peri-urban, we are talking about a diversity of land uses which are also changing rapidly, and there is a terminology that has been evolved over the past, say, 15, 20 years, where this region has gained more prominence for researchers and also for policymakers with different connotations. It's connoted as a transition zone, the urban, the hybrid zone, and also the peri-urban interface, which faces or brings us to facing various questions. Is it a transitional zone in terms of its temporal dimension or in terms of spatial dimension? We may think of the rural-urban continuum or even the rural-urban divide. Or is it maybe even a region that might stay as with some permanency over time? So as you can see, this is the changing landscape to some extent, and we look at Sri Perumbudur, which you can see right at the center of this map. As I said, it's about 40 highway, and what decided is that we look at the Taluk, which is a subdivision of the a district of Kanchipuram in Chennai, which covers around 370 square kilometers. So it's smaller than Chennai metro region nowadays, which has more than 1,100 square kilometers in size. Population is also relatively low. These data are from 2011, so we can expect that there has been already a significant increase again. And then one of the major driving factors for the dynamics in this region are in fact 3 special economic zones. Irungatunkotai, Sri Perumbudur, directly next to Sri Perumbudur town, and Oragadam, which also promote the change of land use. In an overview, you can see here these 4 maps that show the changes of the built-up area in the year 1988 to the top left, and then right to it the year 2001, and to the bottom left the year 2009, and then to the right 2014. And significant here is the emergence not as a sprawl, but along the major development corridors with different characteristics. And we can clearly see how the development corridor in the Taluk emerges in this period of time. as industrial development corridors. So the one in Sri Perumbudur is especially characterized by automobile industries, while the ones that are going towards the south, especially the one along the East Coast Road, along the coast, is the IT hub of Chennai. Yes. The location of the Chennai airport, yes. I think Chennai airport is somewhere here. Yeah, it's right on the outskirts. In Sri Perumbudur, in the taluk, next to the town Sri Perumbudur, there is actually another airport project, but this has not taken shape so far. Now, when we look at the water sector in this region, and also, of course, in connection to Chennai, we can see that there has been a significant transformation of the sector in how water is being sourced, used, and also processed in a way. From the left, you see the more traditional and older ways of managing water, which then towards the right is becoming more interfaced also with technologies, RO and bottled water, and also water tankers that bring the water from the region, from relatively far away, with thousands of journeys every day almost, that varies throughout the year, by water tankers also towards the city. And this is an important area to consider. These changes in the water infrastructure, which is partly an indicator for urban development, and the changes that are initiated through the build-up in terms of building up pipelines, overhead tanks, and also then the question of which structures are being abandoned, particularly replacing former water system structures with this modern technology. So there is a change in the demands, receivers and suppliers in the entire water sector, which we have to see in the whole context of the metro region of Chennai. This I would like to just mention briefly, not all the details here, but there have been the kulams as water bodies connected to the temples, and then there has also been an intricate so-called TERI systems of water management in Tamil Nadu, which has been in place for hundreds of years. And this system was still intact to a large extent in many parts of Tamil Nadu and also in our study region up until the early 2000s, and 2005, 4. Of course, not all of this has disappeared, but in this particular part, Kulam supplied parts of Sri Perumbudur town with piped drinking water until shortly after 2000, and then has been disconnected from the system. If we look at the region and some of the water bodies, this is only the surface water that we are looking at, we can also see that there are the waterways and then these patches of water bodies that are spread along the rivers. This would be the TERI system, which was primarily used for irrigation for agricultural purposes in the region. So some of these are still in place, while others are being also disconnected from the entire system. Then we did a discourse analysis of the type of actors, of the agents which are involved in Sri Perumbudur at the regional level, and to the left you see the water legislators at the various levels of the state, from the national to the local bodies, which perform particular roles. For example, in Kanchipuram, the district collector, the revenue officer, and also the village play an important role in terms of water management. And then we have a water supplier and the water consumers, and here we also see some of the significant changes with the emergence of large industrial estates as well as gated communities and residential housing communities across the region, which increase the demand and also of course have an impact on the water resource below the surface level. This is a schematization, a schema of institutional and socio-economic mismanagement of water resources. What are the issues that came out through the qualitative interviews with these actors, with these agents that we have taken, and we identified driving forces, then the direct stresses or consequences on water resources management, and finally the impact. So if we look at driving forces, it is population growth and the whole conjunction of urbanization and industrialization, with a combination of the institutional framework, where we find a plethora of institutions and overlapping jurisdictions as well. So this is a challenge, but part of the impact is a water shortage or scarcity, whereby we are arguing to some extent this also has to do with how water is being accessed. So in which way is water actually supplied and delivered? Of course, you are all aware that there has been the Chennai flood. So as one of the immediate situations, and this is something where we believe that can be a turnaround also in thinking about the water resources, because if we look at what are the potentials and opportunities, very often a disaster might be a kind of wake-up call, where from the politicians to the local communities and also researchers start thinking anew about an issue that is not permanently at the mind of people. In our research area, and this is the black frame that you can see here, this window, you can see the Adia River running through this. This is south of the Chembarambakam Reservoir, which is one of the major water resources for Chennai city, for the Chennai metro region, but also to the industries, the special economic zones, and Sri Perumbudur town even. You can see the red area, which is a high flood hazard area, and then the moderate hazard area is this pinkish color. So here we looked actually much more into detail in how the flood has impacted this area, and everything that is light blue are the flood inundated areas, while the dark blue is the lake area, the water reservoir. And there we found that the CMDA, the Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, also has designated built-up areas. So the question here is, how can flood risk hazard management being organized through the way of considering water retention areas and land use that is projected for the next 20, 30 years. And I think very much in line with the previous speaker, the keynote speaker, the idea is to promote a holistic, integrated approach to flood disaster risk management. The focus from a planning and forward-looking perspective would be mitigation and preparedness, the shift from emergency response and relief towards preparedness and mitigation, which is very much a planning challenge and a task for experts as well as policy makers. And while this might be disaster risk management, there is a need to connect this to water systems or water resource management for the agricultural sector, the industrial sector, commercial sector, and residential sector. So one notion would be to rethink actually regional development at a different scale that integrates interdisciplinary knowledge. Now, reference that there is in fact a National Disaster Management Act in place, and also a structure that can be devolved and decentralized down to the local level. But in Tamil Nadu, there has been some delay in establishing this. The act is from 2005, and there has been a State Disaster Management Authority set up in 2001, but there is no state disaster management policy in place. I think there is a plan or a policy in a draft version, which is now being revisited after the flood in 2015, but it's not been in place before that. So there is certainly a need to look into these institutional aspects. Okay, this I have mentioned already. There is this urgency to look at preventive land use planning. This is just an example of one of the areas that was inundated, and where we find at the same time already a land use plan in place for the next years for residential use. Here I think I also cut this a bit shorter due to our limited time, but while Chennai metropolitan area has, of course, a land use master plan in place, in Sri Perumbudur, in the peri-urban region, we don't have an integrated spatial development approach. And similarly, also with flood disaster risk management, there is no concerted effort so far, apart from some of the areas that are natural water retention areas. And from this, capacity building is one of the cross-cutting dimensions that need to be considered, in fact, to build up an institutional framework that cuts across the city and the peri-urban region at the state level. Interventions towards integrating flood disaster risk management could be integrating water retention ponds design. So that would be looking at the ERIs and the ERI system in the region to build up flood retention areas, and also to look at how they could be preventive in terms, or in the case of an unusual collection of water, or in more intense monsoon season. For example, that could be preserve agricultural land, kind of ecologically sensitive zone, but also for economic purposes. So we might think also into other sectors in terms of food provision and food security for a big city like Chennai and the region itself. And flood insurance for farmers and small-scale and medium-scale business enterprises. And also use Parambok land, which is commonly managed and administered land in the villages. Then to think decentralization and the devolution of powers. So how is the public works department working on the ground, and which way maybe a collaborative water management or governance structure could be implemented, the involvement of community, the local level, and at the larger scale, the institutional framework, which is in terms of legislation in place. This is maybe food for thought, more for the discussion. We might go through this. It's also one of the outcomes of our discourse analysis. What were the ideas and notions where intervention can take place? The key issue that most of the people we interviewed from across the administration, politics, and also the local residents at the household level is water shortage and the declining groundwater table, which needs to be addressed in one or the other way. So one would be, of course, desalination plants, more technical approaches, redirection of rivers, but also the renewal of these traditional infrastructures that I mentioned before, and at a smaller impact level also rainwater harvesting. And this is the last slide that brings up what could be options and interventions to address governance in the region, that with a particular focus on water as a systems resource that might be utilized in a more sustainable manner. So I hope that I still, in the realm of the acceptable time frame, have done my best, and maybe we can then pick up more from the question and answer session. Thank you very much.